Hi, this is Emily of Beauties and Headcanons. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
This is Bryce Burge, host of Your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media. After this episode, come join us on a trip around the soccer world as we discuss club and country every Tuesday. Stamp your soccer passport by subscribing on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your Public House Media podcasts. And thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Today's verse of the day comes from Malachi 4:6. He will turn the hearts of the parents to their children, and the hearts of the children to their parents, or else I will come and strike the land with total destruction. Good morning and welcome to the next edition of Verse of the Day, presented by Public House Media. I'm your host, Baxter Colburn. I'm thrilled that you're here for this next edition of the show. A quick reminder for you, Verse of the Day is available on whatever streaming platform that you might choose for your podcast. It's on Spotify. It is on publichousemedia.org. It is on Apple Podcasts. No matter where you find your podcasts, I hope you'll add Verse of the Day continuously to your Monday, Wednesday, Friday repertoire. Also, a big thank you to Mana Vision Media for syndicating today's episode on Mana FM in Budapest, Hungary. We are international, if you did not know. If you have not checked out their website and their station yet, go do so on Facebook or head over to manafm.hu. Let's embrace what God has in store for us today. I want to first address the fact of why we didn't have a show this last Friday. So, this last week for me was a really difficult one as far as emotions, because we're going through a lot of things in my family's household right now, because we're trying to just figure out some dietary issues with our oldest son, Beckham, and my wife, and really we're just trying to get some stuff nailed down, and it was just kind of a very stressful week for us. So when it came time to record my episode for Friday, unfortunately, I didn't have anything left in the tank to give back to you, the listener. So I apologize for that. I typically do not have a show, but because of that situation, because of just where my family was and where I felt I needed to be, it was more important for me to be present with my family this week than to have an episode on Friday. So I just want to make sure I clear that up first and foremost. The fascinating part about that, as I segue into our topic and our verse for today, I want to look at this first part of it again. It says, he will turn the hearts of the parents to their children and the hearts of the children to their parents. I have a very interesting story I want to share with you because I find it fascinating always, all the time, and I shouldn't, because it's amazing more than it's fascinating how God works. And so today, in real time, is April 7th, 2019, and when I'm recording this, obviously it's April 8th for you when you're listening to this. If you're listening to it at a normal production time, is the day that my son was dedicated at church. It was a public declaration that my wife and I stood up in front of our church along with various other families that were having their children dedicated, and we said that we would come alongside our children, we would guide them, we would allow them to experience all the things that Christ has to offer them, and to just give them this opportunity to have a relationship with Christ and to lead Christ-centered lives for them as an example for them of how to live out your faith. And it was an incredible opportunity we had. We've done this with our firstborn child, Beckham, 2 years ago when he was born, and now Rio, who will be 5 months in just a couple of days. We did that with him as it just kind of timed out nicely in our church. It was wonderful. Family was there. Friends were there. It was a great experience. And the big thing that I kept sitting on all day is, how am I modeling Christ for my children? Am I doing enough? Am I being good enough? Am I strong enough? Am I smart enough? Am I educated enough in my faith to be a good, consistent, godly example? Because for me, unfortunately, my parents. My mom did a great job of this, but my dad was not so great at it, unfortunately, especially after my parents got divorced. And that was hard. That was very hard for me because I craved a solid father figure in my life. And even with my mom, when she was going through some issues with her divorce and just life as a whole, I even looked for just second and third dairy mother figures in my life just to kind of continue to stay on the straight and narrow. It wasn't that I didn't think either of my parents were capable of doing it. It's just that I wanted to add one less thing to my parents' plates by saying, hey, please continue to raise me and parent me. So I went and found other mother and father figures temporarily while they were struggling with their own things. So that way I felt like I was still staying in accordance to what God wanted for me and for my life. So I say all of that to say this. When I kept running this check on my life and kept asking myself, and I know my wife has been having this beating at her heart as well, are we good living examples of what being a follower of Christ is? And ironically enough, I would like to say the answer is yes. Well, people, you're listening probably think, well, Baxter, you do a religious podcast 3 times a week. You're involved in your men's group at church. Your wife leads a women's group Monday night. A lot of your friends are Christians. Great, but that doesn't mean that I'm always living out my life to the fullest of what God has in store for me. So let me take you on a small journey. Friday night, we had 2 friends of ours over, non-believers, and we just got into just conversation, catching up with life. But as the night went on, I'll be honest, we were drinking some wine, but it wasn't like we were trying to be crazy. We weren't doing anything, and none of us were inebriated by any stretch of the imagination. I'm Italian, for gosh sakes. It takes more than a half a bottle of wine to do that to me, but that's besides the point. But as the night went on and the conversations kept going on, the conversations kept getting weirder and more awkward and just strange. The topics of conversation that came up. And my wife and I just kind of went along with the conversation because we hadn't seen this couple in a while and we just wanted to catch up with them. And we didn't really know how to engage in the topics that were being brought up. And it was just like they left. It was, and there was after that, after a couple hours, we said goodbye. They went home and we went to bed. And the next morning, my wife woke up and she was like, I just don't feel good. And I'm like, oh, and she's been, like I said, she's been struggling with some dietary issues. So I was like, okay, maybe she's having issues with that. And I was like, oh, can I get you something to eat? She's like, no, it's nothing to do with that. She's like, I feel really just icky with our conversations that we were involved in last night. She's like, that's not the type of relationships and that's not the type of conversation, number one, I want to be having, but number two, I want to be having, especially in our home. We bought our home a couple months ago with the intent of gathering believers and non-believers into our roof so that way we can nurture and grow and help and develop others that are trying to find so many different answers on this long journey of life about what it means to be a Christian. We don't have the answers 100%. No, we don't. But we still are trying to figure things out. So I felt very similar to my wife, and I've been mulling over the feelings. I've been trying to figure out what it is, because in that moment when I took stock of my life, I wasn't a good Christian in that moment, because I should have stopped the conversation. I should have redirected, or I should have said, hey, that's not what we do in this house. We don't have these types of conversations. And I didn't do that in the moment. I kind of played along and then addressed it with my wife the next day, when I should have stepped up as a leader of my house and done so. And engaging in those conversations made me feel icky. It made me feel kind of like after you have kind of like a greasy burger or something, you just kind of get that icky feeling inside of your body, like, ugh, it was good for a little bit, but I just don't really, that was bad. That was just bad. And that's how I felt, and that's how my wife felt the next morning. So I have it on my heart that I need to reach out to this couple and just have a conversation with them about that, because we love them very much. And as them, like I said, with them both being non-believers, we certainly want to be that good model. But in that moment, in retrospect, we weren't good models. We were engaged in sinful conversation about topics we had no business discussing really at all, but we still were. And that hurt, because as I stood in front of a church full of people on Sunday saying, yes, I will live out my life, and my wife saying, yes, we will live out our lives as good Christians, as good examples to our kids, I had a little bit of guilt sitting in the back of my mind being like, that's not right, and that's not who I want to be. So I urge you to take constant stock of your life, and I urge you to take constant stock of the words that you use, of the media that you consume, of the actions that you do on a daily basis, and the people that you spend time with. Now, I'm not saying that you need to just go and do a purge of everything in your life, but I want you to be cautious of those things that I just mentioned. Because life goes by really fast, and next thing you know, your kids are in high school or they're in college and they're out the door, and you're sitting there second guessing, did I do enough? Did I do enough? And a big thing that your kids are always going to be looking to you at is, does mom and dad believe in Jesus? I hear people talk about this Jesus guy all the time. Do they believe? Are they? And they say, well, they say they believe. We go to church on Sundays, but when we're home, mom's always using the F word and always, downplaying dad and doing all this other stuff. Or dad says he's a believer, but I've seen him constantly, flipping other drivers off or they cut him off, or boasting about stealing something from work or cheating on something of this. Like, what examples are we setting for our kids? That's why we need to make sure, like this verse says, where we need to turn our hearts towards our children. Our children will turn their hearts towards us as parents. We have a massive responsibility, and our children have a massive responsibility in our life as well. So I know that it's not something that it's the easiest thing to hear, but I want to encourage you on this Monday, because this is something that all of us need time to just dig deeper into. What life are you living? What examples are you setting for your kids? Are you living a Christian life? And if you're not, what needs to change so that way you can be that example for them? Because, as is often so many times said, you might be the only Bible some people ever read, including your own children. So keep yourself centered on what God has in store for you. Stay in tune with Him by praying, by listening, by engaging in the Bible, by filling your heart and your mind with content that will be uplifting and build you up and make you a better Christ-centered person. I appreciate you joining me on this episode of Verse of the Day. I'm so excited for our upcoming Wednesday episode when we have a new guest coming on. It's going to be a lot of fun to have her on the show. I'm so grateful for you joining the episode today, and I pray that you have a blessed Monday. Thanks for listening.